So continuing our journey on automation, we talked about automation pipelines, and I did touch upon CI/CD in that section as well. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment. So let's look further into what is CI/CD. So you use CI/CD as a set of acronyms to talk about automation when we do software development. And as we said, it stands for CI is the first part of that kind of pipeline that we talked about, which is the continuous integration. And the latter part of that pipeline, which is when you deploy it, is called continuous deployment. Together, CI/CD is what you're going to be hearing, which kind of interchangeably used with pipelines. So in a nutshell, what is CI/CD? Is that as soon as somebody drops a code, the developer drops a code into the Bitbucket or GitHub as a repository, as part of the pipeline, a set of processes gets triggered to test, to validate the new code, to see if there are any problems, any defects, and to make sure that it hasn't broken what was there already. And if that is okay, it deploys that code to the environment. This process allows the continuous development, dropping of the code into the repository, and then set of process kicks off and takes that through the testing thresholds that we talked about and deploys to the environment if everything's okay, if it passes through all the thresholds. So can that mean zero-touch deployment? And what is zero-touch deployment? If everything's working fine, that means if you drop a code into the repository and then there are thresholds set in the testing of the code, which is SonarQube, or the 45, which we talked about in the previous section, was about the vulnerabilities. If those thresholds are set to say 80% for the SonarQube tool, which is all about testing the code to make sure that it is still working as supposed to be and it hasn't broken what was there before, and then setting the threshold for the 45 to making sure there are no critical vulnerabilities or high. If that is set and the code that is being dropped passes that, then basically everything will go right through the pipeline, starting from here all the way through the environment. So there's hardly anybody doing anything. That's why as soon as you drop it, it becomes zero touch and everything gets deployed to the environment. So this is fine, and you can try this on the dev environment, QA environment, and then you want to get a bit more serious and making sure that the thresholds are clear, making sure that if there's anything else that should be set up as a threshold, that is done so that UAT is our like a pre-production environment. If that goes well, then you know that you can also have it in the production environment as well. In my experience, as a tip, I have never had anybody or any organization that I worked for that made zero-touch deployment to production. They always wanted to have a control to make sure that everything is fine. We will review the results, and then you will do manual pressing of that button or whatever to deploy to production. So I have not come across any organization that has said we will have zero-touch deployment to production. Yes, we have it for other environments, but for production, there is that still hesitancy that I'm not sure we have everything right, so they haven't done that. But I do know, and I have heard that organizations like Google, Netflix, they are pretty good at this. So they have zero-touch deployment pipelines. Everything seems to be cleaned up, and they know that everything goes through, then is clean to deploy without any problem. So they do that all the time. So therefore, their pipelines can be deploying into production at any time because nothing has broken. So it is a really good thing to get to, but that all depends on the organization's maturity of the agile principles, automation, and what kind of pipelines they have put together. And all that depends on the individuals, the team, the talent, and that's important. So as we said before, this just illustrates in a different kind of color scheme to show you that each one has its own kind of threshold set, and after each threshold has been successfully achieved, there has been no more. The code has passed that threshold. Does it move from one area to the next area? So if everything's clean, if the code gets dropped here, if it's clean, it gets deployed to the environment. So here we're just showing that as an illustration, that if everything is cleaned up and good to go, it will get deployed into production or into the environment that it is intended for. And then the final diagram just kind of highlights that what we said earlier on, that if every threshold has been the code has managed to get through, and then it becomes a zero-touch deployment. As we said, it all depends on the organization that you work in, how mature they are, how were they able to set their pipelines up. So to conclude, continuous integration and continuous deployment is a very cool setup. It really helps to avoid calling each other, hey, can you test my code? Yeah, I will do it in a minute. It doesn't have that kind of setup. It kind of speeds up the whole thing, and therefore the defect identification, making sure the code is clean, is pretty much caught in the beginning of the test cycle, as opposed to the old waterfall way where the testing is pretty much left to the testing team when the project moves into testing phase. So you'll find all the bugs and defects then. But here you'll find that the unit testing that the developer has set up, or the SonarQube tool, will make sure that the code is pretty clean. So when it does get to any QA function to be tested, the code is pretty clean. And if the pipelines are all hooked up properly, you'll find that the whole process of testing is pretty much taken care of. And that's what you need as part of sprint. You need something that is continuously flowing and not holding up the production line or the pipeline, so that the 2-week sprint is able to do the coding, do the testing, fix any defects, and then retest again. So it kind of bypasses all these change requests, approvals from people, which may take a long time. And the waterfall, you find these are the kind of challenges you have. But in the agile way, if pipelines or CI/CDs are set up, you'll have a very good way of optimizing your kind of development lifecycle, and you'll get a lot of things done in a very short time.